So hello and a big welcome everyone to the second Fireside Chat session hosted by MEMPC. If you have not heard of MEMPC before, we are the Masters of Engineering Management Programs Consortium. We are a group of Master of Engineering Management programs at 9 of the leading universities in the US. You can check us out and our programs at www.mempc.org. MEMPC was formed with the goal of increasing awareness about the Master of Engineering Management as a degree with prospective students and employers, as well as sharing best practices in engineering management education. The goal for this Fireside Chat series is to showcase the strength and versatility of our MEM degree by showcasing our alums, while also building a community of students and alumni. So a big warm welcome to everyone who's joined us today. I also want to extend a very warm welcome to our speaker for the day, Nikki Slaughter. Nikki is the Director of Post-Deployment Operations at Vecna Robotics, where she manages the remote support, field service, and technical documentation teams. And she's also a Tufts MSEM alumna. And before I move on, I also want to introduce Nancy. Nancy works for the Tufts Gordon Institute, and she's part of the MSEM programs. I'll give her a couple of seconds to introduce herself. Nancy, would you like to start?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I'm really happy you're here to hear Nikki speak about her experience in an MSEM program, and look forward to moderating the Q&A. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions. I'm the Director of Admissions and Professional Programs here at Tufts. And again, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. So let's talk to Nikki. And one of the most impressive things about Nikki when I looked at her LinkedIn profile is the fact that she's held so many different roles in a variety of industries, and she has worked in startups and large organizations. So I'm really excited to hear from her and learn about her experience and insight along her career path. So Nikki, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your amazing career journey?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, Ritu, and hi, Nancy. I spent time with Nancy when I was at Tufts as well. But yeah, so everyone, my name is Nikki Slaughter. I'm currently working at Vecna Robotics in Waltham, Massachusetts, where I am the Director of Post-Deployment Operations, which is a mouthful for basically saying the Director of Support for our customers. My journey has been all over the place. I actually got my undergrad degree in mechanical engineering, but prior to that, way back, I was first introduced to robotics in middle school. I was actually part of the first Lego Robotics League and got introduced to engineering as a concept at a very early age, and kind of took that through my education and my career path to eventually still stay in kind of the robotics and engineering disciplines. I was also very lucky to go to a vocational high school where I was able to do engineering and pre-robotics. So that was in Cranston, Rhode Island, which is just like an hour away from where I live here. And from there, I went to Tufts undergrad where I studied mechanical engineering. While I was at Tufts, I had a number of different things that I was getting involved in, both from a professional side of things as well as educational as well. So up here from Tufts, all these arrows that are going all over the place. The first one that's kind of straight up with the little yellow poof ball in the middle is the Center for Engineering Education Outreach at Tufts. They get involved in teaching young students about engineering at an early age with Legos, with the same sort of kits that the first Lego League does. And I was actually working there in developing engineering curriculum to teach students and to teach teachers how to use Legos and engineering concepts. I also was involved in the Center for STEM Diversity, so promoting diversity in all the engineering and math technical fields, and how we as a university could also improve and help our students achieve their goals as well. Additionally, while I was at Tufts, I was involved in National Society of Black Engineers. There are a whole bunch of professional organizations and societies out there, so I highly recommend, if you're not involved in one already, go seek one out. There's Society of Women Engineers, there's SHIP, which I think you were saying there was the career fair just last week for them. So go seek those out. It's a really great place to network, to build your community as you're learning, and people that are going through a lot of the same things that you are in their technical engineering journey. So those three things during school really helped me elevate my education and also elevate me to what was going to be out there in the world as well, and get that kind of almost pre-professional experience. But I also did an engineering internship, or a couple of them, throughout my time in undergrad as well. The first one that I did was with a company called Textron. They are a defense contracting company. And I figured, why not give it a shot? This was a field that was something that mechanical engineers would do. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to get into. And I actually learned very quickly that I didn't want to be working in defense. So that internship was a really good nod to at least say, hey, I gave it a shot. It wasn't for me. And then I went on to the next internship with a company called Second Wind, which was definitely not in the robotics realm. It was completely different than what I thought I would be doing, but I ended up really loving it. They made equipment that actually helped prospect for wind energy development. So wherever you build a wind turbine, you have to make sure it's actually a good place to put a wind turbine. Loved it there, and ended up turning that internship into a full-time role in mechanical engineering. And shortly after that, our company actually got acquired. So it had started off as a very small American homegrown startup-y company, and then we got acquired by Vecna, which was a very large global international company. It was a very big shift and a very big change for all of us to get used to how we could just be Wild West and design and do fun things. And now we had to be all about process and documentation and communication. So it was a big change. And during that, I actually had the opportunity to change from an individual contributor to a leadership role. They asked if I wanted to do or project management for the engineering team, and I kind of hesitantly said, sure, why not? And they took it as a absolutely sure. So once I did that, I also realized very quickly that I needed some leadership skills to actually lead that team, drive them forward in the direction that we really needed to go. And that's actually what drove me to come back to the Tufts MEMPC program and gain those skills that were both soft skills as well as driving technical engineering teams forward. While I was in the program, I also started to realize that I didn't really want to work at Vecna anymore. I really wanted to get back into robotics, which is where I had started my interests. And I was actually able to make that shift in career move through a recruiter. So I was showing most of my skills. Like, I was always keeping my LinkedIn profile updated. I had a bunch of connections in different industries and people that I kept in touch with from my previous roles and jobs. And I was able to use that network to actually drive a change in my career path as well. So when I moved into Balia, they are also an international company that specializes in forklift robotic solutions. They're actually a direct competitor to where I work today. But I had the chance to join their team as an external project manager. So all my experience before had just been in internal team leadership, but this was actually working with customers, developing a solution, traveling, going to all these different sites, trying to figure out how to solve difficult engineering problems, and also lead a team of different types of people to reach that end goal. It was very fun. It was a lot of travel. It was cool to see all these different places. But in the end, I actually was looking to kind of flip that to more of an internal role. And I ended up deciding to change to a different company to make that happen, just because Balia was a startup as well, and there were limited opportunities for growth there at the time. But now that I'm at Vecna, I actually started and have done so many different things. We are also a startup. We also do forklift robotics. But when I moved here, I actually started as a validation team manager, which is basically the fancy name for the testing team. We were making sure that the robots actually did what they were supposed to, that they were running at the highest quality possible, and that they were also safe. And in that role, I was actually building a team from scratch. There was actually no testing team when I first arrived. So it was a really cool opportunity for me to learn, how do you build a team? How do you build from the ground up the processes to actually do the work that we need to do? Did that for a few years, ended up changing roles partway through to operational excellence manager, which is also around building processes and tools and ways that we can succeed overall. So this was more in our customer success organization. So I moved from engineering to customer and figuring out how do we, again, perform the best we can so that our customers can also perform the best they can as well with our products. And then most recently, I've just moved into this role for Director of Post-Deployment Operations, where I'm leading multiple different teams in terms of customer service, making sure, again, that our customers are getting that great experience, making sure that our service processes are the best that they can be so we're efficient, profitable, and have room for growth over time. And outside of just work fun things, my two little pictures there, we actually have a rollerblading club here at Vecna. So that's me attempting to rollerblade during COVID. And I also have two wonderful cats who drive me crazy all the time. But those are some of the fun things I do outside of work as well.
That is awesome, Nikki. Thank you for this introduction. And I hope I see one of your cats maybe somehow jump up on Zoom, because my cats seem to always figure out when I'm in a Zoom call and decide to kind of make an appearance.
Oh,
Otherwise,
yeah,
they'll sleep the whole. Yes, exactly.
they always know.
Perfect timing, right?
Yeah.
I have a question about your career journey, and
Sure.
what is fascinating to me is the different roles you have had. So you went from mechanical engineer to an engineering project manager to an external facing project manager. Now, were these all conscious decisions that you wanted to gain experience in those areas, or was it just that opportunity arose and you're like, oh, that sounds exciting, let's try it?
Yeah, I think a lot of these I always do this thing, and actually I think at Tufts they teach this too, but I always do this thing to ask, like, am I happy with what I'm doing? Am I getting the challenge that I want in my current role or the role that I'm hopefully growing into? So a lot of these were really conscious decisions to say, hey, like, yeah, I'm ready for that next step. This is the next challenge I think I want or I think I need. To kind of grow my career and move into something else. So I think early on in my career, I always knew that, yes, I wanted to get my hands dirty to understand how to be the individual contributor, but that I was interested in growing into that leadership role over time. But I knew that, like, I had to get that experience early on before I could move there. And then I think that first opportunity when I was working at Vizsla to do that engineering project manager role, I was really pleasantly surprised at how much I loved team leadership. So I think it was one of those things that I was like, let me give this a shot. It is that next challenge. If I don't like it, like if I didn't like Textron, that wouldn't be for me, and I'll try something else. So most of these were definitely like a conscious decision and a conscious, is this what I want for my career growth? Yeah.
That's great. And I just want to also clarify so our attendees know, did you do Tufts MSCM while you were working at Vaisala, or did you kind of go back to school full time?
Yeah, I did both. I was working and doing the grad program at the same time, which I have to say was very tough. It's not for everyone, but definitely what was nice is my company was very flexible. I worked with them to create a schedule that I could get my work done as well as do school. And again, I know that's not every company. It doesn't work for every person's schedule, but it is definitely feasible. I was definitely heads down for 2 years straight, but it was well worth it, and I'm really glad I did it.
And this is a question I ask, I mean, all our MEM alums, because I know what my story is, how I found MEM. How did you learn about Tufts MSCM program?
I think so I remember in my undergrad, there were always like advertisements within the engineering department about, hey, there's this engineering like management program, why don't you do this? So I think I knew about it from way back when, but I knew that I wanted to get the working experience before going into the program. And I'm pretty sure I also got it somehow through all the alumni networks. So again, staying in touch with people that you know from school, your professors, that will all come back later in your career or your educational journey as well. So I think those were the important connections for me to know that, hey, this program exists for when you're ready for it. So I think that's really how I ended up finding it.
That is amazing. And yes, I know the importance of networks. Like you have to start. I think a lot of people think that their networks are useful when they have a job and they're looking for the next job, but they don't realize that you start building it while you are in school to get the first job. And who knows, like, as you said, come back to grad school as well. That's very, very helpful. So you're one of the few who knew about MEM. So great job, Nancy, promoting Tufts MSCM within Tufts at least. Because a lot of the stories I hear are more like, oh, I didn't know this degree existed, but as soon as I found out, I knew this was it. And I was full on go, but it was a lot of it is by chance. And that's partly why the consortium was formed, so that we kind of reduce the luck factor about our students finding about MEM, but actually make sure that as many people know about it as possible. And then they choose whether they want to do an MEM or not. And that's fine, but not have it like, oh yes, on the chance, but on the off chance that they talk to somebody who mentions the degree and then they find us kind of thing.
Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah, and I do remember like the nice thing too with the Tufts program, and I'm sure other programs, is if you do get that opportunity to like go visit, see a class, talk to some current students,
Absolutely.
that really made my decision, and understanding like what I was gonna get into for the curriculum as well is a good idea.
I think that's an amazing advice, because 100%, like going to a school, attending a class or two, talking to the people kind of make you realize whether you are at home, this is your program, or you need to keep looking, if you will. So in my case, it was more like I went somewhere and I said, oh, this is not for me. And I found a different program that actually worked for me. So it works both ways, but it is very important to actually just, take that opportunity if you have it, for sure. All right, back into the regular schedule programming, talking about your experiences and your insights. So the question I have, and knowing, I feel like it's amazing that you have this underlying thread of robotics running through your career, but it's also interesting that you did take some detours. But how was it being a leader in all of these different roles and all of these different industries? And then also, as you mentioned, like a smaller organization like a startup versus a larger organization like Vaisala, and then moving back towards Vecna, which is more of a smaller organization.
Sure, yeah, definitely. I think being a leader means so many different things these days. So you can be a leader who's a manager, you can be a leader who doesn't manage anybody. So I think it really just overall, like just being a leader means that you're somebody who can gather a lot of different types of people around one idea and execute a plan. So I think that's the really important thing, to know that you don't have to manage people in order to be a leader. So like when I started at Second Wind, like again, I was an individual contributor. I was really just part of the team. Somebody else was leading and telling you what to do. But when I got that chance at Vaisala, I was put into the team leader role, but nobody actually reported to me. They all still had their managers somewhere else, and I was just kind of collecting everybody around the idea of a project and what we were going to do. That actually ended up being a pretty big challenge, and also was one of the reasons why I decided to go to Tufts, was because I had started as an individual contributor and people had still seen me in that light. They didn't always go with what we were trying to do, trying to push forward. And I recognized that I needed to build some of those skills to motivate the team and motivate them around not just me, but the idea and the concepts we were trying to deliver on. So that was really interesting. And also at the same time, from moving to that small company to a large company, everybody was also going through growing pains about how do we work in a larger company? How do we work with international folks who look at things differently than Americans? So it was a very big change overall, and I think a good growth opportunity for me to like learn that, yes, I needed to grow my skills, not just as an engineer, but as a leader. So that was a really great experience, and I think it made me realize that there were things like, how do I communicate better? How do I create the concepts, or align people on a concept, or ask for challenging ideas? things like that. So that those two companies and that transition was super, super beneficial for me to just decide where I needed to go and what I wanted to do as a leader. And then again, when I moved back into robotics, I made that conscious decision because I really wanted to be in that particular industry. And moving to the customer facing side, I wanted to get that experience to understand what people are going to do with our product in the end. Because you can design something that's super cool, or you think it's super cool, and then nobody uses it. But I wanted to understand what could we do to like deliver a product that actually was usable and brought value to our customers. So that was really important for me. And moving to Valio, it was also a conscious decision for me to try working with a different international company, just because most companies these days are international to some extent. So I wanted to see what a different culture was like. And it was interesting. It was very different. Working, our engineering department was in France versus we were just delivery organization in the US. So if we needed something, it ended up taking 24 hours just to get an answer sometimes. So we had to learn patience as well as how to deliver as fast as possible. So that was a really interesting way to kind of lead a team and just drive, like both drive things as fast as possible with patience. And then finally at Vecna, it was my chance to kind of take all that experience from the field, bring it back internally to a different organization, similar but different, and use that expertise to drive growth. So here at Vecna, we're probably a little more early stages than we were at Valio. And my experience from Valio was really pivotal in making decisions for us as a company to kind of grow, become more robust, to gain more customers, to understand some of the problems before they happen, and be prepared as an organization to tackle them. And I think that one was really great because I was able to kind of impart some knowledge and like allow people to take it or leave it, which is also part of the leadership journey. You don't have to listen to everything your manager or leader says. You challenge it in a very respectful way. But it's okay to do things differently. You don't have to do things all the same. So I think working here, it's been really nice to kind of have that collaborative spirit and see how it really is from kind of the beginnings of a startup. Versus some of my other startup organizations were a little more established at the time. So yeah.
That just sounds amazing. And I totally understand what you mean about one international organization versus another, also international, multinational, organizational. When I worked for Motorola for a while, we used to joke about that the sun never sets on a Motorola team. Like there's always somebody you hand off to who's working on it. And by the time you come back, chances are it has kind of moved forward. And so, but if you haven't aligned and if your team's not working well, then that move forward could be a good thing or a bad thing at the end of it. So I totally empathize with it and understand what you're saying. I'm gonna stop sharing your career journey, and for the attendees, I will send it out to you after this fireside chat, so you have it. In case you want to connect with Nikki and have questions about it, you have a good graphic to kind of look at it and remember the conversation we just had. Perfect. Here, there we go. Back to our faces again. In all of your experiences, and this is more, I am curious about it. Like, do you have any memorable stories or challenges that you've overcome that you want to share? Because I feel like every alum has had a different path and a different experience coming out of MEM, even though everybody's kind of gone through a very similar education. And the challenges they've faced are so inspiring. And also a way for our prospective students to understand what kind of roles and problems they could tackle post-MEM.
Sure. I'll tell a story that's actually pre-MSEM, but I think now that I've gone through the program, it's prepped me even more for this. But I think one of my most memorable experiences was during that time where I was a project manager at Vecna and kind of new to that role. I had some meetings with the team where I really wasn't being heard in the meetings, or it was losing control and people weren't allowing me to rein it in or just ignoring me. And as a woman in engineering, everyone in that room, they were a man. And it was very hard to kind of get my voice heard above the thunder, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a lot of trouble, and actually I think this was really early on in the MSEM program where I did talk through that problem with one of my advisors there and came up with a idea that like I should go talk to one of my colleagues and see if I can actually have an advocate on my side to help me with those situations. And I think that's one big thing with leadership is that you don't have to do it alone. You should definitely find people who can be on your team, on your side, and advocate for you, especially in times when you're trying everything you can and it's just not working. So I ended up doing that. I did talk to, there was one member on my team who I worked with in some other settings one-on-one, and I brought up during that time with him to say, hey, like you've seen me run this meeting, you've seen how it gets out of control and nobody listens, right? And he's like, yeah, he's like, actually, I have noticed that. And I asked him, I was like, well, why haven't you said anything? And he answered me honestly, and he said, well, I didn't want to step in or say anything because I didn't want to overstep you. And it was nice to hear that he actually recognized it, but he didn't want to go ahead and do that because it would undermine maybe my leadership during that moment. But in talking about it and agreeing together that, hey, you have my permission to step in because I'd like your help. I'd like you to be there and have my back for this. That just having that conversation helped so much. The next meeting we had where everyone started talking again, I started to rein it in, and I basically like gave him like a signal to say, okay, now it's your turn. I've done what I can. And he jumped in and people heard. And it was he said it in a way that was like, hey guys, this is Nikki's meeting. Like nobody's listening. You need to keep on track. And she's trying to keep this moving in a direction that makes sense. And then he was able to return it to me. And from then on, it was better. But again, over time, like sometimes things devolve, but it did actually help quite drastically for meetings that on forward that people were listening. They were paying attention. So again, find an advocate. No, you don't have to do it alone. I think that's the biggest thing with leadership is that you're not in your own silo, and there's people there for you too.
That's awesome. Yes, it's interesting you mentioned that about meetings, getting out of hand. When we worked at, I was part of the systems engineering team for a very long time. And so our stakeholders, we would have at least 10, 11, 12 stakeholders in a meeting. And somehow our strategy was always to kind of have a one-on-one conversation before the meeting to understand everybody's perspective. So by the time you get to it, you kind of have an idea as to what everybody's going to say, so you can kind of rein it in. And I know there were times where we would call meetings impromptu, and a lot of our systems engineers would be shaking their heads saying, "Nuh-uh, we haven't had a chance to prep. No, we don't know what people are going to come from." And then it just evolves into chaos, and you have like round 2s and 3s afterwards to then figure out what to do.
Yeah, being prepared, having an agenda, knowing what the topics will be for sure.
Exactly. And I love that you mentioned that you were able to talk this problem out with somebody at MEM, one of your professors, and who helped you. And I think that's the advantage of working and going to school at the same time, right? You get to kind of implement what you just learned, or get some help implementing what you're trying to do, if you will. How was your customer facing role? Any stories about, because I can imagine that was a completely different skill set, right? And
I do have a good customer facing one too. So we had my time at Balio, we had a project that was not going as planned. It was taking a very long time, and the customer was upset, obviously, that their project wasn't delivered on time. So I ended up I was out at their site, and also our CEO of the company decided at the same time he was going to come do an American tour and see all of our sites. So he was with me, as well as my director. So it was just me and the biggest execs in my company going to visit this very upset customer. And we entered the conference room, and it was kind of that thing where it's like, we're on this side, they're on that side. Everyone looks very angry. The CEO is looking at me like, okay, what are you gonna do? And we let the customer say their piece. They were very upset. at one point, actually, one of the customers, he was this very big, like football looking guy. And he stands up with his hands on the table and looks me right in the eye and lays it out. And I'm sitting there very calm because I've had my training from the MSEM program. I'm listening to what he's saying. I'm taking it all in and making sure that he has his chance to say what he needs to say. And I'm calm, and both of my director and CEO are looking at me like sweating, just like very scared about what's about to happen. And I answered him in a very honest and clear way to say, hey, these are the reasons why your project is delayed. We're working on them. We understand all of the things that you said. And I had an answer to every single one of his concerns. And it was really nice that it was like he was listening. Like, luckily, if he wasn't listening, it could have still gone in a pretty bad direction. But he took it in. He was actually very impressed with the answer. He was like, I like that. I like that you guys are working on it. He's like, I'm still upset that we're late, and rightfully so. But it was good that I actually had that ability to kind of take it in, not be afraid or nervous about this difficult situation that was right in front of me. And I also was prepped because I knew that there were going to be questions coming up. So another thing that we talked about was strategy is be prepared for the questions or the issues that you think will come up, so you have an answer immediately. So I had that list of things that I knew I was like, this is probably going to be asked, so I should prep for it. And it ended up being a really good meeting. Afterwards, the CEO was like, that was amazing. He's like, I don't know what I would have done in that situation. So it worked out in the end. And eventually, like, we got the project done. We delivered on all the things that we talked about. But it was definitely a very like kind of scary and difficult situation to deal with at the time.
I can imagine. And talk about being cool and calm under pressure, right? Like a whole
Yeah.
new, it gives it a whole new meaning to it.
Yeah.
Do you feel like in that situation it worked as well as it did because you were listening very actively and you gave the customer an opportunity to vent their
Mhm.
frustrations out
Yeah.
instead of kind of talking
And
over them?
exactly. And sometimes that's all it is. Sometimes is allowing the person to get it all out. Even if some of what they're saying, you're just like, that shouldn't matter. That shouldn't matter. But you're like, oh, that one piece that matters. So sometimes that's all you need every now and then is to get everything out and on the playing field. And you can't always, like, you shouldn't interrupt, you shouldn't inject your own ideas until they've had their chance to fully say what's on their mind and what they're looking for. Because if you do interrupt, it's going to actually make it even more difficult long term. So, and that goes for even internal conversations with your team and planning, like, let everything come out before making a decision and before moving forward.
That is some great advice. Very hard to follow, like easy to say than to do
Mhm.
it, but that is some really good advice for all our audience and listeners. Um, so that was, I guess, one of the important skill sets, right? And listening actively is, as a leader, it's important, especially if you're trying to get insights from somebody else in that
Mhm.
sense. Are there other skill sets that you think are very important in being a successful leader, especially one who can understand the technical engineering technology piece of it,
Mhm.
but also the business side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think some of the biggest things are clarity in how you communicate is huge. If you are just spending your day typing on like Teams or chats all day, a lot of times that can be misinterpreted because you're just doing very quick replies, quick answers. But get used to like writing clear emails, get used to writing requirements, making sure that there's no room for misinterpretation, how you write. And sometimes being more wordy is actually bad. You want to be clear and concise so that people are paying attention to the really important details. Same with verbal communication. You want to be very clear on what you're asking. Sometimes if you're too like high level, people might take things in a different direction than you intended. So if you are doing that verbal communication, asking somebody, hey, did you understand? Or can you repeat back what you think I said? Those are important things to do, and just make sure that, again, everybody's aligned on what you're asking for in your communication. The other thing, which I think kind of I touched on before, is collaboration and delegation. You can't do everything on your own. You do need to feel comfortable with kind of releasing some work. letting other people take the lead on certain things or get a chance to grow their skills as well. As you grow in leadership, you're going to move further and further away from maybe the individual contributor that maybe used to be. And you have to be okay with letting that go and letting others do that as well. And collaborating and making sure that if they do need help, that you can be there and you can provide that support as well. And then definitely the other thing is just allowing alternate ideas to be heard or considered. There's definitely a lot of organizations out there that just drive, this is what we're doing, and there's nothing you can say about it. You can't change that. This is just it. It works for some organizations, but it doesn't make for a lot of happy employees sometimes. So allowing that on your team to say, hey, like, this is the initial idea, but does anyone have something else? Or do you want to challenge this? Or could we do this in a different way? Maybe a cheaper way, or maybe a faster way, or whatever. So allowing that actually helps people want to help you and achieve that end goal. So be flexible and definitely, again, like listen to what your team has to offer.
I totally agree. And I think when you say allowing their ideas to be put forth and to be heard, it kind of gives them that sense of ownership that they contributed. So they kind of co-created the solution or whatever you plan to do. And it's not like I'm telling you what to do, but it's like we all talked about it. And this is what the plan, if you will. And I love that you mentioned the idea of collaboration in the sense that also not just asking somebody to say, hey, come up with a solution to this problem, but saying, hey, what can I help you with? Because a lot of the times, a lot of people think being a manager means just delegating and they're throwing it over the wall and say, you fix it, not my problem. But that's not true. I think some of the most important questions that I've heard as an employee when I was working was like, how can I help you? Like, you know, you're doing this tough thing. How can I help you in that sense? Not that I'll tell you what to do, but how can I help you? So I think that's a very good point, Nikki. I have one last question, and I know somebody raised their hand. I don't think there's a way for me to unmute you or anything, but if you can put your questions in the Q&A box, that would be great. And then that way Nancy can keep an eye on it and we can go through it during the Q&A. So any tips or advice for our audience or listeners who are either engineers or looking to become leaders, like technical leaders, or are prospective students trying to figure out, you know, what their career should look like?
Yeah. I think probably the biggest one is just ask questions. Ask questions of everyone you see, meet, hear. Like I actually do a lot of one-on-ones with people outside of work to just say, hey, they're looking to change careers or they want to understand this program, and I'll set up a meeting and do a Zoom meeting with you throughout the week and kind of talk through what you're looking for and if I have any advice to like help with. And then also just asking questions in your first job. Don't just take things and go with it if you don't fully understand. It's okay to ask questions. No one's gonna think you're stupid or that you don't know things. It just means that you want to learn, you want to understand why before you head down a path that maybe is not the right one because you didn't ask the full set of questions. So don't feel afraid about that. And then probably the second one is just kind of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Being a leader is not just dealing with good times, it's also dealing with bad times. And there's a lot of things in your career that are going to be very uncomfortable to deal with. Like you might have to put somebody on a performance review. You might even have to fire somebody. You might have to, I'm actually dealing with a thing right now where I'm changing our shifts for some of our staff, and that changes the hours in which they're working. And for some people it's great and others it's really not. But you have to drive forward the business decisions, which sometimes can make difficult situations for the people that you're working with as well. And you have to figure out how to deal with those situations diplomatically as well as for the business growth as well. So those are probably my top two things, is just kind of, again, be comfortable with being uncomfortable and ask all the questions.
I want to ask you another follow-up on that one. Like, what are your tips and advice for having these uncomfortable conversations? Because I know that's one thing I'm always like anxious getting into it. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to put a foot wrong, you know, because then it's going to be worse than what it was before. Kind of feel like, what is your advice for having such uncomfortable conversations?
I would say I'm honestly, I still get nervous about them anyway, so I think it's okay to feel that all the time. But I think the biggest thing is to prepare. So prepare for the fact that you're about to give bad news. Prepare for what you think the follow-up questions are, so you know kind of how you're going to answer them when they come up. And again, it's just making sure that you have everything in your back pocket and a way to show why this decision was made or why we're heading in whatever direction. And that you also are showing some sympathy, but not so much so that you're putting them in a bad position either, or the company in a bad position.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we like, again, we're all human. There's always going to be a bad situation, but if it's for a business decision, you need to stick with the facts in terms of why we're making that choice. So it feels terrible. I usually go home and drink some wine after, but, it is a really hard part about being a leader, is those difficult conversations.
Yeah, I can understand, especially the part about showing them the reasoning behind it, so they know it wasn't just a random decision. Like there was some thought. It was a very intentional, thoughtful process that was undertaken, and then that's what you got. Thank you so much for all of the tips and advice. Those are all the questions I had for you. Nancy, do we have questions from the audience? I want to open it up to you all. So if you have any questions, please type some more. Nancy's keeping an eye on it, and we'll start with the first few.
Great, excellent. Yes, we have a few questions. So let me start out with one. How do you deal with engineering teams, especially in robotics, and balancing business decisions as they have more say on the products? So how are you dealing with the engineering teams when those conflicts arise between the business and the product?
It's always fun. So we actually, here at Vecna Robotics, so we actually have a product management department. So they're the ones from the business side who are usually driving the decisions of what our products need to do, and they need to be like this much cost because we're going to have this much margin on top. And they're the ones who are typically working alongside our engineering teams to kind of create that balance of what's feasible versus what we actually want to achieve. And it's a really hard balance, because stuff like building stuff costs money no matter what you do. The product team might say, hey, we need this to be $10, but in reality, you can only build it for 20. And if that can't be met, if you can't figure out how to get within your cost, then maybe it means we need to change what our product is, or change what our customer base is going to be. So for us at Vecna, our robots are doing pallet-specific movements, but mostly ground movements. But then there's a whole other industry of pallet movements that are up in like racking and warehouse stuff. And we've made a conscious decision as a company to like keep our focus on a very small portion of that customer base, because we know we can achieve that now at the cost we need and at the volume our customers need as well. But at some point, again, our business will expand and we'll be able to move into some of those other things. For the engineering side, again, it might not always be exciting. So we're always looking for like the right fit and type of engineers who are looking towards the product design. On the startup side, like kind of we're limited with money, but for a larger company like a Google, for instance, they have endless money. They've got Google X, they've got this crazy research facility that just has money out the wazoo. And at those places, maybe you have a different type of team dynamic where you're just designing just to build new concepts, and there is no end customer yet because you're just trying to create. So I think for those types of things, I think it just depends on the company and the type of funding you have, the type of products, and the type of end users that you're actually trying to meet. So it's just a different dynamic depending on where you are.
Yeah. And did you work with one point you made about product management? A lot of MEM graduates go into product management.
Yes.
After they graduate, that's becoming more popular now, so they can play that interface between the product and the business side. And so do you try to develop a relationship with the PMs, with the product managers, to kind of be able to figure out how to communicate with your engineering team in a more effective way?
Yeah, we do. So, and I work too with the product manager to say, hey, whatever product you're wanting us to build now, it also has to be something we can service and take care of in the field too. So the product management team, they're injected in so many different aspects of every company because they have to make sure the product can be designed, can it be built, can it run, can it be serviced. So they're talking to literally everyone to make sure that this product can actually work out in the world. But yeah, we work with them constantly on new ideas, new concepts, new features. And they're also helping my team specifically with tools and like we do a lot of like remote update tools and stuff. So they're helping us define what those tools need to do to service our products in the field too.
Great, great. I want to make sure, because I know we only have about 10 minutes or so left, so make sure if you have some questions to please, this is the time. Anything you're thinking, someone else is probably thinking the same thing, and it's always good to throw it out there. We have a question that's more specific to your industry, Nikki, and the type of work you do, but it may be of interest to other people. And that has to do with what do you think is the best way to measure the quality of, so you're in customer support, right? And this could apply maybe beyond robotics. What's the best practice, or the best way to measure the quality of the response you're giving to the customer in resolving technical issues? So this whole issue of measurement.
Yeah, we're doing all of that right now. It's like my favorite topic. I could go on for hours.
Okay, perfect.
But we do a ton of data analytics actually. So we actually can capture a lot of different things about how our robots run in the field, as well as how we support. So we are able to look at our response times to supporting a robot that might need help, and how long it also takes us to fix that robot. So there's two different aspects, just like how quickly did you respond and check out what's going on with that robot, and then how long is it to actually fix it. And that whole time is what the customer is concerned about, is just like, keep my robots moving and make sure they're not down. So we look at analytics all the time in terms of, was it stopped because it was a product issue? Was it stopped because it was actually a workflow issue on site? So our robots actually work alongside humans. So if a human gets in the way, the robot stops, waits for them. So we can actually tell that, hey, it's not the product, it's how you guys are working around the robots. And some of it's also how long is it taking the agent to support something. So maybe it's a new agent on the team, they're getting familiar with how to support, and it'll inherently take them a little bit longer to fix a robot than somebody who's been on the team for a few years. So we look at all this data in so many different ways to just kind of see, how is our support experience? Is it the best we can provide? Are there things we can do to make it better? So there's so many different ways we can slice and dice the data to make those business decisions.
Great. And another sort of related topic, and I don't know if you have a magic bullet, this is another question that's very common, is how do you kick off and get customers interested in training so that they know? So right, you're trying to solve the problems with measuring your response to the problems, but any tricks and tips for actually engaging them and getting training started for the use of your robots?
I have to say, a lot of people hate training, but it's something we have to do. It's actually interesting in my industry, we have a technical standard that actually outlines that we have to provide training with our products. So we'll physically send somebody to site once the robots are fully deployed and about to start working. And we'll actually work with their operations teams to show them, here's how the robots work. This is how you interact with it. This is how you can help with some basic troubleshooting. And these are the safety things to be aware of as well. So we have a combo of classroom setting trainings as well as hands-on trainings with the robots. We also have some of our staff stay on site as they're first starting to use the robots and make sure that people are reminded of those training practices that we taught them, and also help them with anything that maybe wasn't clear or wasn't initially kind of sinking in during those sessions as well. So training is huge in this particular industry, and just mostly because it's required, but also because working with our robots, they're very big. They can definitely hurt you if you don't use them in the right way. It's kind of, I kind of equate our robots to like self-driving cars, but they're just self-driving forklifts. So you can definitely still get into a bad accident with a self-driving car. So it's the same with a self-driving forklift. You need to know how to safely operate it, and how you can also allow it to do its job while you're doing your job too. So training is huge and very, very important. And we do have a lot of people on our team who are very good at teaching. So I think that's the biggest aspect, is how do you teach people and get them engaged and excited about the product in front of them too.
Great. I know a few people had asked Nikki on the slide that you showed. I think there was a way for them to connect with you through LinkedIn.
Yes.
Is that what your recommendation was? I couldn't remember what was on the slide.
Yeah,
So if you could just
yeah.
share that, you'll share the PDF after, Rudy, with people. Okay.
Yes, I will. And I think I have linked Nikki's LinkedIn profile on the invitation and so on. I'll put it in the chat here as well for everybody in case you want to connect. Nikki, I'm assuming that's the best way to connect with you after
Yep.
this session.
Yeah,
Perfect. Let me
definitely.
do that right now. That way everybody has it.
Excellent. Right. And I think the only other thing, I guess, Nikki, I was curious about, a lot of people that are probably on the call or others that might listen to this in terms of the landscape you see for, what's happening in hiring and how you see MEM graduates or people with these skill sets, how to best leverage what they're doing in order to think about their next step.
Yeah, I think oh, I'm getting a little feedback, but I think the landscape right now it's a little rocky. It's definitely hard right now in the startup field. So I would say, like, you might not start in that amazing startup that you definitely want to do right now, but look at different types of career paths. You don't have to do robotics right away if that's like your calling. Like, you can do just like what I did. I worked in renewables and tried a different path just to get some hands-on experience in other aspects of the career that I wanted to build long term. So I'd say don't shy away from other industries and also other types of roles. You can't like there are ways that you can look at those other roles and say, hey, I'm going to get this piece of the pie of my leadership skills, and then the next thing I'll get the other piece and build on that. So I think that's really important to look at when you're starting to job hunt. And I would also say, again, depending on the climate and the landscape in certain industries, again, some of the larger companies like Google's and Amazon's are doing great things, although I know Amazon had some layoffs as well, but it depends what parts of those companies you're working at. There's stability in some, there's also a lot of instability, but with the instability, there's opportunities to do many things and wear many hats. So I would say it just really comes down to what part of your leadership journey are you most interested to grow now, and think of some alternatives if you can't find the perfect thing right away.
That's some very great advice, Nikki. And as we can see, like, the career path is not a linear line. Like, you always, have a very circuitous route. You can have detours, and a lot of the times the detours are really good learning opportunities for you to grow. And maybe that's just preparing you for your next role that you didn't even know you wanted, kind of thing, in that sense, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. I think those are all the questions and all the time we have for questions. So I want to thank all the attendees for joining us. I appreciate you taking a time out of your schedule for an hour or so to come hear Nikki speak. Nancy, thank you so much for keeping an eye on the Q&A and moderating the Q&A for us. And last but not least, Nikki, thank you so much. I know you have a very busy schedule, but you've been very open and honest and shared all of your experiences and insights with all of our audiences and listeners. And I'm sure I appreciate it, and I know that they appreciate it as well. I am recording this webinar, so I will try to get the recording out to all the attendees soon. I just posted a LinkedIn profile, link to Nikki's LinkedIn profile in the chat. I will also send it out in my thank you email to everyone at the end of this. Perfect. And thank you again for joining us, and watch out for our next Fireside Chat in a few weeks. You should receive some communication from us. Thank you again, Nikki. Hope you all have a great weekend. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Nikki.